Mr. Stefan Thomas.
Hilarious. I had a meeting and had dinner with the production team last night, and Wes said, all right, we've given you the music that you wanted, we're going to give you the dry ice, but you need to run onto the stage, you need to come on with loads of energy, because you're the slot just before lunch, people are getting a bit fidgety, they'll want loads of energy. And I said, Wes, I'm a 46-year-old man, I've got 3 sons, a hernia and sleep apnea. Instead of running onto stage, how about I sort of gently wander? Would that be okay? Frustrated rock star, but just too old to do it these days. So my name's Stefan. I'm the author of a couple of books, Business Networking for Dummies and Instant Networking. And I spend my life actually talking to people about business networking now. That's actually what I do for a living. But business networking skills are for life. They're not just for breakfast. And that's what I'm here to talk about. If you could laugh at the proper jokes, that would be fantastic as well, along the way. Because there are some in here, I promise. That one wasn't actually a joke, but I'm glad you laughed. But business networking skills are for life, not just for breakfast. One of the things that I fell in love with about business networking along the way was that this stuff that I could learn in a really safe environment, whether it was for networking or BNI or other networking events, this stuff I could actually use in real life. This stuff I could actually use when I go out and meet people. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about some of the networking skills that I've picked up along the way that I reckon could be really useful to you in your business. How many of you go to some sort of networking events as part of your business? Good. How many of you, whether you go or not, get nervous about going to networking events? I still do. I still do. I had a pretty dreadful start to my networking experience. These days, since I started networking in 2005, I've been to over 1,000 business networking events. That's 1,000 cooked vegetarian breakfasts in the last 12 years. I didn't get this size by accident. 9 years I've been using that joke, and that's the best laugh I've ever had for it. But I do a lot of networking. Including events like this. But the very first networking event I went to, I was very badly set up for it. Back in 2005, I was invited to something called Whitney Big Breakfast. I live just outside a town called Whitney in Oxfordshire. That's where my voice comes from. It used to be the constituency of one David Cameron MP, so all of our doctors' surgeries are open and all of our bins get collected. If I do that in Newcastle, I get a different response. But I went to this thing called Whitney Big Breakfast. A friend of mine called Sharon had invited me. In 2005, I'd been an estate agent for about 20 years. Okay. Usually get booed at that point. But I'd been an estate agent for about 20 years, and estate agency is that archetypal local business. The more other local business people I could get to meet, the more people I could network with, the better that was going to be for my business. And when Sharon invited me, she just said, it's this thing called Whitney Big Breakfast. It will be a group of local business people sitting down and having breakfast together and chatting. And I thought, how hard can that be? I talk to people. I go into their houses. They come into my office, and I talk to people. So how hard can this business networking thing be? And I remember turning up at Whitney Big Breakfast. How many of you here arrived on your own this morning? Right. I remember turning up at Whitney Big Breakfast on my own. And there were about 20 people in the room. And the thing that I noticed first was that everyone else was standing around in little groups and little gaggles, and they're talking to each other, and they're, how's business, how's your family? Making it all very apparent that I'm the new boy. Ever felt like the new boy somewhere? Yeah, I did. I looked at all of these people, and I convinced myself of all of this stuff. I convinced myself that everyone else in the room had a better business than me. Found out years later that that definitely wasn't the case. Thought that everyone else in the room was more confident than me. That was probably the case. Thought that everyone in the room had a bigger house than me, that they had a better car than me, that they had more money than me, that they were getting more sex than me. I convinced myself of all of this stuff. I found our level. Excellent. I'll stay there. Convinced myself of all of this stuff and just started to feel really small. And I don't do small very well these days, but I just felt really small. But the people of Witney are quite polite. They got me in, they got me sat down, and 15 minutes later, I'm quite chilled. I'm sat next to two guys. I'm sat next to David, who's an accountant, and I'm sat next to Jamie, who sold light bulbs and batteries. John Welts is in the room somewhere and knows exactly who I'm talking about. So I've sat myself next to these two guys, and I think, I can get the hang of this. I can see how this works. This guy David's an accountant. Everyone knows him. Everyone trusts him. If just he gets to know me, I can see how he'll be able to refer people to my business. And Jamie is that guy. Jamie's that guy who talks to everyone in Witney and West Oxfordshire, because what he does is goes out walking around shops and offices, going in there, spotting where they've got a bulb missing, and selling them light bulbs and batteries. That's what he did. And I thought, this is fantastic. This guy Jamie knows everyone. I wonder why no one else ever sits next to him. Yeah. And then the very worst thing happened, because I'm sat there, I'm enjoying myself, I'm chatting, and then they introduced something called the 60-second round. You all know about the 60-second round at networking events? No one told me in advance. You know in business you have to get out of your comfort zone. My comfort zone is not speaking in front of groups of people. And in 2005, it very definitely wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't what I was prepared for. And all of a sudden, Sharon, who had invited me, she was invited to stand up and present her business. And I don't remember what Sharon said. But what I do remember is that Sharon suddenly became this incredible presenter. She was really energetic. She was absolutely word perfect. She knew how to describe her business in 60 seconds. She used body language to make the points that she wanted to make. And she even remembered to pause, so that those of you who are looking at your phone think you've missed something and you look up. Sharon did all of that in 60 seconds. Sharon sat down, the person next to her stood up, and I stopped listening to what the people in the room were saying. Because instead of listening now, I'm starting to panic. I'm starting to think, is there a way I can get out of this situation? It's really funny. When you talk about that panic, it starts to come back. You get dry-mouthed and everything like that. I was actually panicking. The sensible thing for me to do is to wait my turn, stand up, do my bit, sit back down again, everyone's happy. But what my mind's telling me to do is oh, shall I get sorry, what, one of the boys has fallen out of a tree. I'll come home straight away. Do I go to the toilet and never come back? I've seen people do it. As it went round the room, the presentations are getting more and more vibrant. People are getting into the in-jokes more. Everyone's getting more and more confident. I'm panicking more. And it gets to Jamie, who sat next to me, and I find out. Because Jamie McIntyre stands up and says, I'm Jamie McIntyre from Abacus Light Bulbs and Batteries. I will beat any price you're paying for your light bulbs and batteries. Tell me what you're paying, and I'll beat that price. In fact, lie to me about what you're paying for your light bulbs and batteries, and I will beat that price too. 2 minutes he kept that up for. That pace, that volume. Jamie sits down, and everyone looks at me and says, oh, follow that then. And somehow I fell in love with business networking. I stood up and said, hi, I'm Stefan from Abbey Properties, sat down and fell in love with it. And a couple of years later, life changed for me a little bit. Ended up being self-employed by accident, as some of you may be. This was never my choice. It was something that happened to me. And latched onto business networking as a way of putting myself out there and winning business. And I'd sort of fallen in love with it because I wasn't a Jamie. I wasn't going to go pushing doors and talking to people. So business networking worked for me. And then you think, 10 years later, why did I come here today? Why did I bring myself along here today? Why do I do 3 networking events a week? I've written the books now, that stuff's done, and so on. And it's for this reason, that Wes talked about a little conversation that him and I had about 3 years ago. And then I get the opportunity to stand up here in front of you guys and speak. Every big opportunity that I've ever had has started with a little conversation somewhere. The real opportunity is that most people don't bother. The real opportunity is that most people don't bother to start enough of those small conversations and continue those conversations in a meaningful way that they turn into this sort of opportunity for me. Most people don't bother to actually go out and talk to the people, and we've heard some fantastic presentations from people this morning who actually do, and I'm guessing you're the guys who are in the room because you do. Most people don't bother. People say to me, but you were just in the right place at the right time. Being in the right place at the right time is ridiculously simple. It's just not that easy, and that's why most people don't bother doing it. And I'm going to talk for the next 15 minutes about how you can be in the right place at the right time, more often than not, how you can turn more of these conversations into opportunities, and how you can get more out of networking. I knew that the shouting would catch up with me in the end. How you can get more out of networking. Water, I knew I would. So when you go to a networking event, whose business do you go there for the sake of? It's not a trick question. People sometimes think, is it a trick question? Is he talking about referrals? Is he talking about something else? When you go to a networking event, when you start talking to people, people turn up at things for the sake of their business and not yours. What really intrigues me then, when we stand up and do our 60 seconds or 40 seconds, or when we start talking to people, is that very often we're taught to talk about ourselves. We're taught to do this clever thing called the elevator pitch. You all heard of the elevator pitch? Okay. I first heard about the elevator pitch, I think, in the 1990s. And I've got a couple of problems with it. It's this idea that if you were in a lift, when I first read it, it was if you were in a lift with Donald Trump. What would you say to him? But if you were in a... Yeah, that. If you were in a lift with Richard Branson, you've got 60 seconds, you're only going up to the 3rd floor. You're in a lift with Richard Branson. What are you going to tell him about your business to get him excited? If you really did that to Richard Branson, this is my first problem. If you really did that to Richard Branson and you suddenly got in a lift and you pitched at him for 60 seconds and you just talked about your stuff, is he going to get his checkbook out or is he going to start pressing the security button? My second problem with it is that we're in England. It's a lift, it's not an elevator. But when we stand up at networking events, what we're taught to do is to talk about the thing that's only of interest to one person in the room, ourselves. What I got my head round was that everyone else in the room was there for the sake of their business. When I start talking to people, if everyone else is there for the sake of their business, why don't I phrase my stuff? Why don't I think about what they're buying rather than what I'm selling, which is very subtly different? Why don't I think about what I can do to help them? Why don't I think about, to use Wes's expression, which I've stolen now, just making friends for the sake of making friends, getting to know the people and seeing what comes of it. What most people do when they go to networking events is forget that everyone else is there for the same reason as them. The other thing that really intrigued me, I was an estate agent for 20 years. We advertised in the Oxford Times every single week for those 20 years. And we used to spend half a day preparing what we were going to put in the Oxford Times. We used to put all of our stuff together. We didn't ever wait for the guy to phone and then say, oh, what, tomorrow? Let's just say that this week. That'll have to work. And yet I see people go to networking events, I see people pitch up and start talking to people, and they only think about what they're going to say as they stand up. For me, it was always far too important to just wing it. If you're going to go to networking events, if you're thinking about what you're going to say to people, please prepare it in advance. It's perfectly okay to have it written down. Just off stage where you can't see, I've still got a comfort blanket of my notes just in case I lose my way. And I don't pretend to go for a glass of water and read it, promise. It's okay to have it written down. The biggest tip that people pick me up on from the books is that as well as writing it down, pretty much all of you carry a device that looks a little bit like this. They've all got a voice recorder, memo recorder, or something like that on them. It's really worthwhile. If you've got to do a 60-second pitch or 40-second pitch or a speech from the stage, think about using the recording device on there to record it, because it'll do a number of things for you. Have you ever seen a 60-second that went on for 4 minutes? Yeah? I've seen plenty of those. Have you ever seen a best man speech that only lasted for 90 seconds? I've seen one of those. If you write stuff down, you tend to hugely overestimate or underestimate how long it's going to take to read. So if you record it, it will help you to time it. It will also do something else for you. When we write, I'm a lefty, when we write, we tend to use subtly more formal language than when we speak. If we write a speech down and try and read it, we'll use words writing it down that we wouldn't use in our natural language, that will trip us over. When you guys get finished here today, when you guys get finished here this evening, you won't turn to the person next to you and say, with kind regards. You tend to write in subtly more formal language than you speak. So think about recording it. The other thing that it does is that it does help you to fix it up here. It does help you to memorize stuff. Believe it or not, before I do this, I have recorded my presentation, listened to it back, done it again many, many times so that I can do it up here and give the impression that I've got no notes and that sort of thing. So think about doing that if you're going to networking events, but think most importantly about what the people are buying rather than what you're selling. The other thing that we did when we went in the Oxford Times is that we never put every single house we had for sale. We never told people about every service that we offered, because our advert in the Oxford Times, the point of it was to just get people calling us. Most of my career was pre-internet. All of my career in estate agency was pre-social media. So I know it sounds terribly quaint these days, but the reason that we advertised in the Oxford Times was to actually get people to walk into our office and actually speak to us in real life. We wanted to give people enough that they wanted to find out more from us and not give them so much that they thought, great, we know all about that, we don't need to talk to them. What a load of people try and do at networking events is cram everything into 40 or 60 seconds so that people can sit there and think, that's great, I know what they do, I don't need to speak to them anymore. Think about giving people enough that they want to find out more. Don't give them everything so that they don't need to talk to you. But what most people do at networking events, what most people do at stuff like this, we tend to get terribly right. And it's come up a couple of times this morning, and I'm really, really pleased it did. It's what most of us don't do after we first met people. You'll meet someone today for the first time, you'll have a chat with someone, you think that person's brilliant, you'd really like to connect with them, you really think that they were awesome, and then you'll leave here today, and a number of things will happen to you. You'll get a couple of missed calls that you've got to deal with. You've got an email from a client that you've got to deal with. You've got a Facebook message from your 20-year-old asking for more money because he spent his student grant already. Or is that just me? Student loan, of course. You get all of this stuff that comes into your mind and is higher priority than the person you just talked to. Everyone else in the world is as busy as you. If you meet people in real life or if you meet people at networking events, it is your job to remind them that you exist. It's not their job to remember you. And what most of us do is never, ever follow up. We know that the conversation starts either at something like this or whether we meet people at the school gates or at a formal networking event, and yet we never continue that conversation. People say to me, it's all right, I've given them my business card. If they need me, they'll come back to me. But people just forget you in the nicest possible way. It's your job to continually remind people that you exist and not their job to remember you. Do you have DFS, the furniture store, advertising where you're from? Yeah? When does their sale end? Did it end on Boxing Day because they said it was going to? Or is it Easter now? No matter what size audience and where I am in the UK that I talk about DFS, you all know that they sell sofas, yeah? And they've got a sale on, and they do interest-free credit. And yet I also know that when you get home this evening, if you put on commercial television, that DFS will tell you that they sell sofas, will tell you that they've got a sale, and will tell you that they do interest-free credit, and will do that over and over again. And not only do they keep telling you, they take up the most expensive pieces of real estate on television, the bit in between Coronation Street, to tell you a load of stuff that you already know. So why did DFS do that? Because there's one thing that DFS don't know about you. They don't know when you're going to get home on a Sunday and think, the dog's done that thing again, we're going to have to get a new sofa, or we've got family coming round for Easter, we're going to need to get some sofa beds. DFS don't know when the right time is for you to be thinking about buying a sofa. Because we all want to sell stuff when we want to sell stuff. But other people want to buy when they want to buy. DFS recognize that, so in a slightly old-fashioned way these days, they keep broadcasting their message to you, because they just need to be there, they need to be in your face, and I think it was Fran who talked about it this morning, they need to be there in your face when you think about buying a sofa. We need to be in touch with people, because you never know when someone who's talked to you about either of the opportunities that Utility Warehouse offers, you never know when someone's going to lose their job, Tesco's announced another 1,000 over the weekend. You know, you never know when people are going to think about now they really need to tighten their belts and save money at home. You never know when someone who might not have listened to you or even poo-pooed your idea before might now be in the right frame of mind to listen to you. So it's your job to keep in touch with them. And in 2017, yeah, I got it right. Didn't say 2016. In 2017, you've got so many options to keep in touch with people. You have email, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, the telephone. In 2017, it is still perfectly legal and acceptable to actually pick up the phone and talk to people. And I know they were talking about it earlier on. How easy is it when you receive an email to file it away and pretend you'll reply later? But actually picking up the phone and having conversations with people is massively underrated. Most people never follow up at all. The real opportunity is that most people won't bother. Most people never follow up at all, but when people do follow up, I find that they do it in a really intriguing way. Remember that everyone's here for their sake, for the sake of their business. And yet often when people follow up with me, they do something like, "Hey, Stefan, it was great to meet you this morning. Now, here's 800 words about our opportunity, and I've even attached a PDF and a video." How many of you file those away when you receive them from anyone else? But don't answer the next question. How many of you are still sending stuff like that? The best book that was ever written about following up on social media, and I noticed that Barry's actually got it for sale today, the best book that was ever written about following up on social media is a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. It was written in 1937 by a guy called Dale Carnegie. Have you all read it? Okay, if you haven't, do buy that book. I'm not here to advertise Barry, but do buy that book, please. What Dale Carnegie says, and I'll misquote him badly, is that you will win more friends in 2 months by being interested in them than you will in 2 years by trying to be interesting to them. And what most people do, particularly on social media, is spend all their time trying to be interesting rather than being interested in other people. It is more effort to be interested in the other guy. That's why most people won't bother. But I am proof that actually being out there, genuinely caring, genuinely being interested in the other person does come back, does work. If you're following up with people, if you want to keep in people's faces, if you want people to remember you when they suddenly realize they need to talk to you about one of the opportunities, it's your job to keep in their face, and you can do so by being out there and being genuinely interested in the other guy. No matter who they are, because this is my final tip. The biggest mistake that I see people making, at business networking particularly, but in real life as well, is to judge or underestimate the other people in the room based on what it says on their badge or what they're wearing or some perception. People prejudge, decide that they're not going to be interested in the opportunities, they won't be the right person for it, he's just not right for it. People make all of these judgments. I met someone called Kathy at a for networking meeting in Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire in 2009. And Kathy was a self-employed sole trader HR consultant. And we had a one-to-one and got to know each other, and Kathy ended up taking me on to do some writing work for her. And I was doing that for about 6 months, and we were getting on really well. Kathy's business was growing terribly well. And after about 6 months, she picked up the phone and said she was winding up the business because she'd been headhunted. Because before being a self-employed HR consultant, Kathy had been HR director for a retailer called Next. Prior to that, she'd been operations director for Hamleys in London, and she had been headhunted back into her first love, which was retail. And I'd lost a client. I was thrilled for Kathy because she'd become a friend, but I'd lost a client along the way. But we kept in touch on LinkedIn particularly. And after about 6 months, Kathy picked up the phone to me again and said, "I really need your help." Yellow, or at least I like to think I am. Blue, actually, but like to think I'm yellow. Kathy picked up the phone and said, "I really need your help. We're opening a new store on Tuesday," this was Thursday, in Cardiff. The company meant to be doing the presentation, can't now make it. Can you turn up and do it? It's £1,200 for a 45-minute presentation plus expenses. Took me that long. Maybe that long. I turned up, did the presentation, got a load of work from Barrett's. 9 people contacted me to say, "Please, can you introduce me to whoever buys this? Who does that? Who's responsible for this at Barrett's? Who does their utilities?" Obviously, someone did. One person, I didn't need to introduce to Kathy, because he'd met her at a networking meeting when she was self-employed and a sole trader, and had said, I only deal with people with 10 employees or more. Never underestimate the other people in the room. When she was a small fry, he didn't want to get to know her. Now she had a big company, he really wanted to get in front of her. I mentioned that the real opportunity is that most people won't bother, and what I've noticed is that there are utility warehouse distributors within 5 miles of here who've decided that they've got something better to do this weekend, that they don't need to turn up and learn from all the brilliant speakers that you've got on stage. You're the guys who bothered. You're the guys who turned up. That's why I am absolutely convinced you're going to have an awesome 2017. That's telling me I'm out of time. Thank you for listening. Thank you.